Eric Wimmer here with Wasatch Heat Cable. Hey, today I'm going to tell you a little bit about self-regulating heat cable. I have several pieces of heat cable here, but today I'm going to give you my first impression and information that I know about the cables to help you know what cable you would want to buy or install for your house and the pros and cons of each of them. So let's dive into some of this. Okay, so the first cable we got here, I'm going to go into this one. It's Easy Heat. The jacket, I noticed as I'm pulling the polyolefin jacket off, I'm seeing the embedded imprint of the ground braid. So if you can see that, I'm going to kind of put this a little bit closer. So you can see the ground braid. It's kind of a weaved nickel-plated copper. Now this ground braid, it does have an effect on how well the heat cable will transfer heat, as far as how clean the ground braid is on the weave and consistency. But I see that the imprint into the outer jacket is telling me that this has been manufactured with a tight extrusion process, minimizing the air pockets inside. So that's a good thing. It's a really good thing. Let me get a little bit closer. We have the carbon core right there, and that you can see the wires coming out of the carbon core. It's the black jacket that encases those. The carbon core on this, as I was cutting that open and allowing these bus wires to be exposed, the carbon core would crack when I was cutting it. So it didn't allow for a clean glide of the razor to go into it. When I started going into it, it would split and continue. The thing I don't like about that is you'll get micro cracks through the cable if if you were to bend it too much, or if it were to take a direction that maybe you don't want it to, you could crack that core. And if you get micro cracks in that thing, or small areas where it's not a consistent bond, you can generate some overheating in the core and some hot spots, which could shorten the life of the cable. So I'm not too keen on the core being as brittle as it is. I like it a little bit more pliable. The bus wires on this are good. They are nickel plated copper, and they are consistent. This is a 16 gauge wire, so that's good. But yeah, overall, I would give this cable out of on a scale from 1 to 10, I would probably rate this at maybe an 8. I think they need to improve on the carbon polymer core, making it a little more pliable, and I think that would help to increase the life of the cable. So that's Easy Heat for you. Next, let's go to Heatizon. So Heatizon, I'm gonna cut this open and let's see. Okay, so Heatizon, I cut this open here, and one of the first things I noticed is the outer jacket is pretty thick. It's very robust. It's got a heavy duty outer layer. It was a little more difficult to cut into this than the previous one. The Easy Heat was a little bit soft compared to Heatizon. So I know that when pulling cable through the gutters and around corners, I think this is going to hold up really well to abrasive surfaces. They were able to minimize the air pockets inside, any air to allow for better heat transfer. But here's one thing I did not like. The ground braid is not as clean. It looks very inconsistent, and it is spaced apart. There's a lot of gaps. Even though this was imprinted in there really well and the extrusion was probably pretty tight, there are still pockets that will not be able to be eliminated. So you're going to have some difficulty with the heat transfer out of this one. So it's going to have to generate more heat on the core to be able to get that heat outwards. I'll tell you more about that down the road here as we go into these. Let me cut this open here. Okay, this is really interesting. So on this one, we have let's see if we can focus in on this. There's this plastic barrier around the outside Let's see if you can see that there around the outside of the carbon core. So you can see that plastic thing I stripped off of there. I do know when talking to the company on this, they said this is an extra waterproofing barrier. If water's in that far into your cable, you've got other issues way beyond just getting down to the core. So waterproofing barrier, I'm not too convinced that this is really needed. But sure, give them an A for effort on taking care of something that may not be needing to be taken care of. Overall, I'd say the product is good. I'd maybe give it an 8. It's a little bit better than the Easy Heat, but the one thing they could definitely improve on is probably the ground braid, keeping the weave on that really tight. Again, you got a 10-year warranty on this. I do know this company, they do very well at backing their customers and taking care of their customers. You will want to get their specs on what they require to get that full 10-year warranty. But overall, I like the cable. I think I would use it. Next, so here we have a product called Proline from Heatizon Warm Zone. And this, we have installed some of it. I can tell you right now off the top, just handling this, I can tell that the outer jacket is softer, more pliable, but I can even feel air pockets with my fingers. I can tell that it doesn't have a tight extrusion build. So let's cut this open. That just slid right off of there. Okay, so that was interesting. Let me tell you what I discovered with this. The outer jacket of this, I mentioned air pockets. And one thing you're probably wondering is, why is an air pocket so important or not important, or what does it do? So the air pockets inside, if you have air, if you were to go camping and lay on a ground pad, the warmer the pad, the more air is going to be in it to generate insulation. So if you have air pockets that are insulating the cable, the core of this cable up in here has to generate more heat to be able to radiate heat more on the outside, the circumference and the outer area of the cable. So for this cable to do its job, it needs to produce so much heat out here. And if the core needs to produce more heat to get the same amount of heat as, say, this one, it's going to burn out the core, and you can get hot spots. You can also get shorts where it'll overheat. I've actually seen that. But this right here, I can tell the outer jacket needs to be a tighter seal. There needs to be less air inside. I do like the ground braid is very consistent with this. It could be a little bit stronger, like a tighter weave, but it is consistent. Up here in the carbon polymer, it is pliable. It's not brittle, and I did like that. But I do not, well, one thing I do know, by installing this multiple times and cutting into it probably hundreds of times, I do know that the makeup and the extrusion of the core can be slightly inconsistent. So that may leave a thinner outer wall on the outside and you can get separation. It's the same thing with a couple other cables that I'll talk to you about. But I would be willing to bet this is loose enough here that I could probably slide it all the way. Well, that one came right off. So I don't like that. That's a no for me. So this particular product, I would probably give it a 4. They really need to keep a tighter seal and a better bond from the polyolefin outer jacket to the ground braid and eliminate those air pockets. If they can do that, I think the cable would perform a lot better. And I think the outer jacket needs to be a little bit thicker. This is not a very thick outer jacket compared to, say, Heatizon like the last one. I would say it's almost twice as thick from this one. So Heatizon, much better product. Proline, not a super good fan of that one. Okay, next we have these two, which are made in the same factory. You got Deltatherm and you got Heat Trace products. So let's cut into this one. and look at these details. This one also, I can tell, now again, we've installed quite a few feet of this, and it's not as tight as some of the other ones on the extrusion process. So let's cut this open. All right, so this is interesting. This got a lot of air in the cable, a lot of loose ground braid. It's a loose outer jacket. The ground braid itself, I can slide that really easy. That's telling me it's not bonded or held together very well inside. The outer jacket is pretty durable and thick. It's a little more pliable than Heatizon, but it's just as thick as Heatizon. So the outer jacket, I like how durable it is. It felt like this would do really well. Pulling it through gutters, rubbing against abrasive objects around it. But the core of the cable, the ground braid, obviously, I've already said it's got some air in there. The consistency of the weave is not too consistent. It's okay. The polyolefin inner jacket is also pretty durable. It's thick. It was not as easy to cut off as some of the other ones. The core of the cable, though, was not quite as pliable, but it wasn't super brittle either, so it's kind of an in-between. And the bus wires, they look very consistent. They're nickel-plated copper, and they look really good. So overall, it's okay on the build here, but I do think they got a really low score for me as far as the ground braid being loose and a lot of air in there. I do know this from experience of installing this. The distance, let me get this up closer to you. The distance in the bus wires to the outer wall of that, right in here, the distance from the bus wire to the outer wall of that carbon polymer, it will vary depending on the cable and where in the cable you're cutting into. I have seen that distance come thin enough that the bus wire was exposed on the outside. So I know from experience the manufacturing process of this cable is not quite as tight in their tolerances as other cables. As a matter of fact, I can see right now, I haven't cut into the excess part of that. I'm just gonna, let me do something here just for fun. So I can see that the bus wire is not embedded into the carbon core as deep as I would like it to be. And I bet, yep, I can pull it right out of the carbon core. That was a very, very thin layer. It's a thin wall between the bus wire and the carbon core. That, I do know that this particular product has been known for getting cold spots, meaning if the bus wire separates from the carbon core, it cannot conduct electricity and allow the heat generation. So if you have a segment that might be 10 feet, maybe 2 feet, but the bus wire is separated, you'll get a cold spot in that section. So I'm not a huge fan of this as far as that goes. That's a no for me. I would give this cable probably a 5 on a scale from 1 to 10. So hope that helps you on this one. They do give you a 10-year warranty, but again, make sure you got the specs on what you need to report back to register the product. Now let's go to the last two cables here. Again, we have Raychem, the most well-known cable on the market, I would say. And then we have Drexan, which is my favorite cable. And so this is where I feel like we're neck and neck on saying, okay, why would we use one versus the other? And let's dive into these. So Raychem here, Raychem again has a great reputation. They've been around the block for a long time. I would say they're the big dog on the block as far as the manufacturing of self-regulating cable. Okay, so we have Raychem's cable here. This one, if you're familiar with Raychem or not, you'll notice the red with their Winter Guard wet cable is an indicator of 240 volt, and they have a blue one as well that's an indicator of 120 volt. Now, cutting into this, I did notice the gaps in the ground braid. If you look at that closely, you can see the pockets and you can see the red coming through the ground braid, which tells me there's going to be pockets in there that will prevent heat from transferring out. It'll also be an insulator for the cable, something we don't want. Now, cutting the cable, the outer jacket, pretty clean. It's fairly tight. The outer jacket's, I'd say maybe an 8 on durability there. It feels pretty solid, pretty good, but it's not super thick. The core inside is very well made up. As far as the distance from the bus wire to the outer wall of the carbon polymer core, I have noticed when cutting into this and working with Raychem, we've installed quite a bit of this, they're pretty consistent with their makeup and the build. So I'd say they're pretty reliable when it comes to this. But I have seen a lot of cable go bad, and the core I have seen actually go straight to powder, and it has burned up or disintegrated or something. So warranty issue, that's something you'll want to back yourself on and making sure you got a warranty on it. Again, this cable, I'd say the one downside that it really has, and this is my experience, is a 2-year warranty in writing, and I think you can get even up to a 3 or even a 5-year if you register the product and send all the information in. But I have known many people that they can't get the warranty to go beyond that. So if you install a lot of this cable of Raychem, they'll probably take very good care of you. I do know their customer service is phenomenal. They do really well with just backing their customers, troubleshooting and getting information to them. But I would say one of the other things that I'm not too keen on with Raychem is their connection kits. The cable has been a pretty reliable, good cable. Warranty's a little bit low, but anytime you have a splice, you take another cable, you got to tie them together or tee a line off or something like that. I've not been a fan of their connection kits. So they've often allowed water to get in. They're not always super tight. The design and engineering of them, I think, could be improved. So I've seen a lot of this cable go bad without premature before the life of it. And a lot of times it's those kits. Maybe it's the installer didn't do it right. But I think the kits, they could be redone to make it a little bit simpler and easier for the installer and the makeup of the system so that you don't have those problems. Anyway, it's an okay product. I would say give it an 8, other than the warranty and the connection kits. So Drexan is my favorite cable. I like this one a lot, and let's dive into this one. Cut it open. Oh yeah, that outer jacket's tough. I'm still not in there. You know, cutting into this is actually, I'll be honest, the first time that I have cut into multiple cables all within a sitting, and I can see why Drexan has a better product. It is extremely tough. May not be as easy to open this thing up and cut into it, but that just tells me how difficult anything else is going to have trying to get into the cable, like abrasive edges, sharp corners. Okay, So I got this open here, and the first thing that I'm noticing here, I'm going to see if I can open this up. Okay, you see the outer jacket and the inside? I'm hoping you can see all those imprinted ground braid impressions. I do know their process of manufacturing is different than the others, but they don't have any air pockets in the cable at all. The ground braid is very consistent, except for where I gouged it with my knife, but very consistent. It's clean and has really good coverage. Cutting the outer jacket, let's just start with that. I had to go 3 times around just to get through the outer jacket, whereas a lot of these others, Heatizon had a really comparable one, but it still cut through pretty good. This one I'd say is comparable, if anything, a little bit more durable than Heatizon. So outer jacket, I give them a 10 on that one because that was very, very durable, very tough. The ground braid, you're good on that. As we get into the core of Drexan, your second layer of polyolefin jacket, it also had the imprintation of the ground braid. So let me tell you about some of the manufacturing of this and why that is. They are able to eliminate all the air pockets in the cable, so they get better conductivity from the heat source in the center to the outside of the cable. Now, the carbon polymer core, let's just compare it here with Raychem's cable. Let's see if you can see that. Drexan has almost twice as much material in there. With that, it's going to hold up better on a longer period of time. It was very pliable. Both of these were very pliable, so I like that. It was good. But I do believe it was a lot more difficult to cut into this one. It was a tougher material, but it's not brittle, which is nice. On the outer layer, like the outer wall of the carbon core there's like a super thin, almost like a glued on sheath of vinyl or plastic on there. And that's to protect that carbon core, but it also keeps everything really tight in there. Now, one of the reasons why I know Drexan has a better makeup of the cable versus other cables is because of their extrusion process. When they make the cable, they extrude it in a vacuum chamber. So it sucks all the air out of the cable on the inside, sealing everything in there and creating a tight weave. Now, one of the advantages I know that this cable has over other cables in its performance is your length of cable that you can install on a particular breaker with the given power. Now, let me explain how that works. If you had a 20 amp breaker and a 120 volt circuit, Raychem's length is about 150 feet. If you go beyond that, your startup draw off the breaker will trip the cable if you're anywhere below about 30 degrees. Raychem on the other hand, or Drexan on the other hand, you can go 210 feet on a 20 amp 120 volt breaker, giving you the ability to go longer distances, giving you more coverage off the same amount of power. But they produce about the same amount of heat output. Why is that? Here's the reason why is you have a better makeup of the layers, eliminating those air pockets. Now, here's something else to know. These cables, they don't just make them and throw them out there on the market and say, hey, you know what? We got a cable. I think they work. They go through some rigorous testing on these cables. Drexan and Raychem both are ran for 45 minutes, and they cycle them down to a cold temperature. Actually, it's ran 15 minutes, and then they cycle them down about 45 minutes, and then they cycle it up again. And they keep doing this cycle of powering up the cable over and over and over to see when they start breaking down and wearing out. Raychem is, the results are sitting right around 1100 cycles, and then it starts failing. Drexan will go about 1800 plus cycles before it starts failing. So I do know, based on just the test results, the build of the cable, the quality of the product, durability, you're going to get a longer life out of this cable overall. Plus you get the 10-year warranty. If I were to choose a cable and put it on my house, Drexan definitely over Raychem. As a company, we do a lot of installs, and I want to tell you this, we can get many of these cables for a lot less than Drexan, but we choose Drexan because we want to put a cable on somebody's house for a customer, one that we can stand behind and we know we can count on it working through the wintertime. The last thing we want is a cable going haywire or something not working in the middle of January when it's under 2 feet of ice and we got to go out and get rid of the ice and then fix the cable. I don't want to have that happen. So puts the homeowner in a bad spot, puts our company in a bad spot. So we go with the best cable we can find, and this is probably more expensive than all the other cables there. But again, we don't want to compromise on quality. So Drexan is my favorite out of all these cables. I hope that this video is helpful to you as far as information. If you have additional questions, feel free to contact us in our forum down below. Also, reach out on our website at wasatchheatcable.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube. We'd appreciate your support, and feel free to reach out to us with additional questions. Thanks. Eric Wimmer with Wasatch Heat Cable.